So according to the New York Times, they've just published an article titled "Trump Eyes a Bigger, Better Trade Deal with China." And it says the US officials are considering whether they can strike a deal with China that would ramp up its purchases of American goods and investments in the United States. Now, if you go back to 2016, China were investing around $45 billion a year into America. And by 2022, due to Trump's first term trade tariffs, that had fell to about $5 billion, which is a fraction of what it was. Now, I think that Trump is looking for certain things here. However, I'm unsure whether China will go for some of the things. Trump is all about manufacturing and bringing jobs back to America. And I think he's hinted at this before, that he would be interested in opening joint ventures between Chinese companies and American companies. So if you look at certain industries, so let's take the new energy vehicles, for example. Now, China are probably anywhere between 3 and 5 years ahead of where the US are on those vehicles. And you've had the CEO of Ford, he's come over and he's seen for himself how pretty, far ahead Chinese EVs are. And at one point, I think there was a deal being done between Ford and CATL, which are China's leading battery manufacturer, but that was quashed by the Biden administration. But as Trump is all about bringing jobs back to the US, I think that Trump will look to want to bring some joint ventures from China to America with factories. But I think there's a number of problems around this. Now, yeah, it would be good, and I think China would be okay with that in theory. But I think there's a few problems here. Is that first of all, it would mean like some Chinese EV companies or battery companies striking joint ventures with like General Motors or Ford to actually build plants in various areas in the US, which on the face of it is good. And I think possibly they could then bring some of the manufacturing out of Mexico, which Trump doesn't like. That there's this manufacturing in Mexico. He's threatened 25% tariffs there, and Canada also. Those tariffs have actually been suspended. But I think where China are going to have a problem is that they would need to invest considerable sums of money into joint ventures. And I think that the worry for China would be that in 4 years' time, when the American administration changes again, all those policies could change. You could have them wanting to try and freeze assets or seize the company like they did, force them to divest like they did with TikTok. So I think it would be very difficult to come to terms. China would have to lock in some really long-term thing. China's thinking is very, very long-term. They don't do things short-term, and 4 years for China is very, very short-term. So I think that is something that would be a huge concern for China. But it's quite ironic in the sense that America are now wanting to do what China did 20 or 30 years ago, is form joint ventures. And, as part of those contracts, if China agreed to start some joint, there could be some technology transfer involved, just like China did with American manufacturers, 20 or 30 years ago. Yeah, you can come into the market, but you need to transfer the technology. You need to build joint venture factories. So it's kind of funny how things have done a full circle. And now we're seeing the same thing, America wanting possible joint ventures with China. But I think the other thing that Trump would require of the US, one, is that to buy more foodstuffs. A big part of Trump's voter base is farmers. And we saw this under his last presidency, that he wants to get China to buy more agricultural things. And I think that could possibly be something. Now, I see it like this, that there's not much that America has that China needs, but I think there's far more that America need from China. Now, China have rare earths and things like tungsten, graphite, these kind of minerals and rare earths. And these are what China have used to fight back against the blocks on technology from the US. So I think a huge sticking point for China will be access to American technology, i.e. semiconductors or semiconductor machinery, so they can develop their own semiconductors. Now, I honestly don't think that America will sort of rescind on this. I don't think they're going to walk these technology transfers back. It's possible because you have Trump, who's met some of the industry insiders from the tech industry, and they're losing a lot of market share, and they know that once it's lost, once China develops its own semiconductor supply chain and they can master cutting edge, which will happen, is just a matter of time. I think they know that they will have then lost the Chinese market, and not only that, they will have also created a competitor. So I think a lot of this hinges on America. China in no rush to act here. I think America are in more of a position. Trump has ran on this thing that he wants to reduce inflation. So by getting cheaper Chinese products into the economy, cheaper cars, cheaper batteries, cheaper solar, that would bring down inflation in the US. By applying tariffs on Chinese goods, that is not going to bring inflation down. That's actually going to push inflation up, because actually the US consumers will ultimately cover the cost of that inflation. And the thing I mentioned about rare earths and rare metals is that it's not easy for America to go and find those raw materials anywhere else, because other countries just don't have them. China is by far the biggest supplier, controlling more than 90% of some of those raw materials. So it's not a case of that, America can go and buy those things from another country. Whereas if you look at most products, like, foodstuffs and that, energy, China can actually go and buy it from somewhere else. You see a lot of their agriculture buying has moved from the US since the first Trump administration, the tariffs, to countries like Brazil, for example, maybe Argentina. So, it's not in China's interests to not bargain hard here. And I think, however, I do think Trump is a businessman. He sees everything as a deal. And I think a lot of this bluster about 100% tariffs is just that bluster. He wants to sort of, make all these, thinking that it will scare the Chinese into doing something. Well, I don't think it will. Chinese are very, very strategic in what they do. They look very long term. They don't look, 4 years to Chinese is nothing. They look 10, 15, 20 years. And they know that even if America doesn't supply that technology and semiconductors, they will have their own. And I think that will happen within the next 5 to 10 years. And I think at that point, America is stuffed, because they will have lost a lot of the market. Also, the countries that went along with America in this technology ban, ASML, Holland, Hynix, South Korea, Japanese companies, I think they will also really feel a loss of the Chinese market. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see how this plays out. I will make more videos as this story progresses and keep you updated. Love to know what you think in the comments below. However, as always, for now, take care.